On October 8, 2025, 500 National Guard soldiers arrived on Chicago's outskirts, without a request from local or state officials. The order came directly from President Donald Trump, who claimed the move was necessary to protect federal employees and enforce law and order. Troops from both Texas and Illinois were deployed, a controversial decision that bypassed state authority and ignited legal and political debate. Their mission: secure federal buildings and shield ICE agents as immigration enforcement had become a flashpoint in the city. The administration argued that local leaders failed to protect federal officers, leaving the president no choice but to intervene. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem warned that officials who allowed threats against federal agents should face legal consequences. The deployment set a new precedent, using the National Guard to enforce federal authority over local objections. The move was seen as a direct challenge to Chicago's autonomy and a test of federal power. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between city, state, and federal government. Chicago's leadership responded with fierce opposition. Mayor Brandon Johnson called the deployment an act of provocation and signed an executive order creating an ICE-free zone, barring federal immigration agents from city property. On social media, Johnson defied Trump's call for his arrest, framing the conflict as both political and personal. His stance resonated with supporters, highlighting the racial and political stakes of the standoff. Governor J.B. Pritzker condemned the deployment as authoritarian and warned it threatened the foundations of American democracy. Pritzker argued that jailing elected officials for checking presidential power was a direct assault on the rule of law. Both city and state leaders refused to consent to the federal intervention, uniting against what they saw as a politically motivated power grab. Their resistance turned Chicago into a battleground over the limits of presidential authority. The confrontation quickly became a national test of democratic institutions. That evening, hundreds marched through downtown Chicago, protesting the National Guard's presence and the administration's immigration policies. Chants of "Todos somos Silverio" honored Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, an immigrant fatally shot by ICE agents, turning grief into a rallying cry. The protests reflected widespread anger and fear, with many viewing the deployment as a military occupation. A Reuters Ipsos poll showed most Americans opposed using the National Guard in cities without local consent, favoring de-escalation and local control. The administration's justification failed to sway public opinion, revealing a deep disconnect between federal action and national sentiment. The events in Chicago became a flashpoint in the broader debate over presidential power and civil liberties. The conflict soon shifted to the courts. Local officials sought an emergency order to halt the National Guard's activities, while a similar case in California challenged federal deployments elsewhere. A recent court ruling found ICE had violated limits on warrantless arrests, casting doubt on the legality of the enforcement actions the Guard was protecting. Official accounts of threats against federal agents were questioned, especially after witness testimony contradicted the narrative in Silverio's shooting. Facing possible legal defeat, President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, allowing him to deploy troops without state approval. Legal experts warned this would be an unprecedented expansion of presidential power and a dangerous step toward authoritarianism. The threat escalated the crisis, turning a dispute over immigration into a fundamental battle over the separation of powers. The nation watched, uncertain which side would prevail. Chicago's standoff is more than a local dispute. It's a defining moment for American democracy. The crisis forces the nation to confront questions about federal power, states' rights, and the limits of executive authority. The deployment, protests, and legal battles expose deep divisions over immigration and the rule of law. The president's threat to invoke the Insurrection Act tests the resilience of checks and balances. If the executive can override local opposition and court orders with military force, the nature of American democracy itself is at stake. The outcome will shape the future of federalism, civil liberties, and the relationship between government and the governed. Chicago's struggle is a warning and a lesson for the entire country. What happens next will echo for years to come.